thank you for joining us for the Managing GP Pensions at GP Practices webinar, where we're going to be focusing on GP accountants access and the annual practice estimates process. My name is Debbie Roberts and I will be facilitating this afternoon session. Okay, so just to let you know who we've got on the call this afternoon. So we have Katrina, who is our PCSE Senior Stakeholder Relationship Manager. We have Con, who works at the PCSE GP Pensions team, and then just myself, Debbie, from the PCSE Communications team. Okay, so just having a quick look at the agenda then. So we're going to be starting off by looking at linking a GP accountant to a pension scheme member in PCSE Online. We'll then have a look at how you remove a GP accountant's link to a pension scheme member in PCSE Online. And then we'll have a look at the GP accountant access within PCSE Online. We'll then jump on to completing the annual estimate form and how you can submit a revised estimate. And we will end on questions, but like I've already said, we will be pausing for questions throughout the session as well. Okay, so we're going to start off with just showing you how to link your GP accountant to a pension scheme member in PCSE Online. Now, this is for accountants that already have access in PCSE Online. So I'm just going to quickly show you how to do that now with this short video.
In this short video, I'm going to show you how to create a link between an accountant and a GP pension scheme member in PCSE Online so that the accountant user can access the GP's employee contribution statement and also can create a type 1 or type 2 form if required. So in PCSE Online, once we're logged in, then we click the user management option. And when in user management, then we click the create pension accountant tab. Once in the create new pension accountant tab, then the first thing we need to do is enter the username, PCSE Online username of our NHS pension scheme member that we're going to attach the accountant to. Then we're going to check that that's the correct member. So this is our test member's GMC number, etc. We're then going to enter the PCSE Online username for our accountant. This example is an accountant who already has access to PCSE Online, so we need to use the same email address that they use to currently access PCSE Online. And we can see that the screen has populated with our accountant's details. And we can check again that that's the correct accountant that we need to link to our GP. All we need to then do is click create, confirm, and you can see that that's confirmed as being successful. So our accountant will now be able to log into PCSE Online. When they do log into PCSE Online, then they will be able to select the member's GMC number or NHS pension scheme membership number in the employee contribution statement screen and access their details.
Okay, so I'm just going to have a quick pause for questions.
Thanks, Debbie. So I think that's a very short video, but it does show how simple it is. So this is new functionality in the sense that the accountants will need to be linked to GP pension scheme members to be able to see their employee contribution statements. So they've not been able to do that before. So that's going to be a big positive for GP accountants when they're preparing end of year type 1 and type 2 forms. But the user administrators in the practices will need to do this one-off activity to link the accountants to the individual members in the practice. So by following the video, it's going to be very easy to do that. We're going to show you another example in a second that will be where it's an accountant user or a user from an accountancy firm who doesn't currently have access to PCSE Online, and how easy it is to create that role and link to the GP pension scheme member or multiple members for them. But I think it's just really to get across that point that it will need the user administrator. So any of the user administrators in the practice can do this. So, follow those few clicks to get the accountant linked, and also, it will be at a per GP level. So the accountant will only have access to the records, the employee contribution statements of the GP pension scheme members that they act on the behalf of. So it might be, for example, that an accountant or accountancy firm acts on behalf of the partners in a practice, but not the salaried GPs, or some of the GPs and not others. So it will just be a case of going through one by one, and that's that one-off activity. And then, as the video said, and we'll show a bit later on, the GP accountant will then, when they log into PCSE Online, be able to search for the GPs that they've got a legitimate reason for being able to access their data. So it's very straightforward functionality, but I think it's just that kind of time critical point that we'll be at when this functionality goes live, when you come into work on Friday morning, because the deadline for Type 1 and Type 2 forms, as everybody probably knows, is the 28th of February. So, there's about 6 weeks from now till that deadline, and we are all very aware that accountants ramp up their activity on the Type 1 forms in particular once you get into the very end of January and into February. So it's just a plea really to contact the accountants that act for you, or for your practice anyway. Make sure that you know which members of their staff are going to need the access. And the other thing to point out is that it might be that there's 2 or 3 or 4 different members of a firm that need access potentially to the same GP pension scheme member or members, because sometimes it might be person A that's dealing with the record, but on another day or another week it could be person B, and that's fine. The system's been designed to accommodate that scenario, so you will be able to link multiple accountants to the same GP pension scheme member, just so that if different people in the accountancy firm are doing the work for a GP's record or for a GP's end of year certificate, then they're able to do so. So we've got a couple of questions. So do we need to link salaried GPs? So yes, thanks for asking that question. If the salaried GP tells you that they have got an accountant supporting them or a financial advisor supporting them to complete their Type 2 forms, then yes, you would follow the same process to link that person to the GP. What are the Type 1 and Type 2 forms, Abigail? So these are the end of year certificates that the GP pension scheme members need to complete. So a salaried GP needs to complete a Type 2 form every year to get their pension contributions reconciled and make sure we can get the record up to date. And a GP partner or a non-GP partner needs to complete a Type 1 form. So that answers that question. There's a question here about who else can access the employee contribution statement and what access do they need. So employee contribution statements can only be accessed by the GP pension scheme member themselves, so the GP or the non-GP partner, and then anyone who's given this role. So though it's called GP accountant role, all you'll be able to do with this role is access the employee contribution statement of the GP pension scheme members the accountant is linked to. If necessary, also use PCSE Online to create a Type 1 form or a Type 2 form for that GP. But if you're a practice manager who supports the salaried GPs to complete the Type 2 forms, for example, I know that some do that, then that you can also have that role for the GP pension scheme members that it's relevant. If you're providing the support, then you're not an accountant, but you're a pseudo accountant. It's the name of the role is GP accountant, but not everybody who the GP wants to have that role to see their information will be an actual accountant, if that makes sense. Let's just try and take a couple more, Debbie, before we move on. So I don't seem to have the create a new pension accountant option. What we might not have done at the outset, we should have confirmed that this functionality doesn't go live until Thursday night, so you'll not see it till Friday. So we're doing this today to get everybody ready and make sure that you are ready for Friday morning. So that will be there. If you're a user administrator, then you will see that these new tabs in the user administration section or user management section when you log in on Friday, assuming your deployment all goes to plan.
So the next video that we're going to show you, which Katrina has already mentioned, this is for accountants that don't currently have access to PCSE Online.
In this example, I'll show you how to create an accountant user for a GP pension scheme member so that the accountant can access the pension scheme member's employee contribution statement on PCSE Online and create a Type 1 or Type 2 form for them. First thing we do is click User Management option when logged into PCSE Online as a user administrator, and then we're going to click Create Pension Accountant. Now, in this example, our accountant already has a contact registered with PCSE because they've made inquiries, submitted forms manually on behalf of clients before, but they don't have any current PCSE Online access. So first thing we do is enter the PCSE Online username of our pension scheme member. So that's the email address that the GP pension scheme member uses to log into PCSE Online. We've got the correct membership number and GMC details, etc. And then we're going to enter the email address of our accountant and pop that in. And what we'll see is, in this example, our accountant has a contact in the PCSE system, but they don't have PCSE Online access. So the message tells us here that there isn't a user record. So what will happen now is we're going to confirm the telephone number if we need to for the accountant. So the contact number, and we click create, but then the accountant will receive a separate email to verify their email address. And then once they have done that, then after that, they'll be able to log into PCSE Online and access the GP pension scheme member's employee contribution statement. So all we need to do here is click create, confirm that this is the right action, and that's the user access registered, but it does need the accountant to go to the verification email and confirm that, and then they will be able to log into PCSE Online.
Okay, so I'm going to jump straight to the next video then. So this is going to show you how to remove a GP accountant's link to a pension scheme member in PCSE Online.
In this short video, I'm going to show you how to disassociate the link between a GP pensions accountant and a GP pension scheme member in PCSE Online. This is action you would take if you had been informed by the GP pension scheme member that they had changed accountant, the accountant was no longer acting on their behalf, etc. So first of all, when you've logged into PCSE Online as a user administrator, you click User Management, and then we click Manage Pension Accountants. Now, we can either search for the accountant or we can search for the GP pension scheme member. So in this example, I'm going to go to the drop down and select GMC code so that I can enter that to select GP pension scheme member that has asked me to disassociate the accountant link. So I'm going to paste in the dummy GMC number for a test, GP, and then click apply. And what you can see is there'll be some history over time for some people where the accountant or the pension scheme member has had multiple different accountants associated with them at different times. There may be 2 or 3 members of the same accountancy firm associated with a GP, for example, at the same time, or they may have previously changed accountants. So you can see we've had some activity in our test environment, but that we have one active accountant for our GP currently, and we have the ability then to edit user. So we click on this action, edit user, and that will bring up the details of our pension scheme member and the accountant. So we make sure that we've got the correct association, the correct pairing. And then all we need to do is click this deactivate accountant button, click again, confirm to confirm the action. And that now means that this accountant no longer has access to the employee contribution statement or end of year certificates for our particular pension scheme member. If the accountant has links to multiple pension scheme members, then their link to all of the other pension scheme members will remain. We haven't deactivated their PCSE online account. We have simply broken the link, disassociated them from that particular GP pension scheme member.
Okay, so just before we move on to show you what it looks like for the GP accountant in PCSE Online, I'm just going to see if there's any more questions with regard to assigning the roles. Katrina, I don't know if there's anything that you want to run through.
Yeah, there's a couple. There was a bit of a follow-up question, which is a good point to cover off really, which is about the scenario where the accountant that acts for the practice, I guess, already has access to PCSE Online, has various roles in the practice. They might have statement roles and, already the existing GP accountant role that they could use now to create a Type 1 form for a partner or a Type 2 form for a salaried GP. Now, when we go live with this new functionality, that in that scenario, the user will still have access to PCSE Online, and if they have things like statement roles, etc., they will still have that whenever they log in and then select your practice. But the old or existing accountant role will no longer exist. That's been replaced by this new role. So if they wanted, for instance, to create a Type 1 form, they won't be able to do that until your practice user administrator links them to the pension scheme member or the multiple pension scheme members in your practice that they do act for. So once they have done that, then our user will be able to, as we've already covered, create a Type 1 form if that's what they normally do for the partner on PCSE Online, but they will also be able to access the employee contribution statement to help them better prepare for that, which is the reason we've introduced functionality has been introduced really in sort of response to feedback from the accountant community who've said for quite some time how helpful it would be to be able to access the employee contribution statements. And it's relatively straightforward if the GP is just a partner in one practice and the accountant acts for that practice because they have access to all the information that they need. But as lots of GPs undertake various roles, they might do some solo work for out of hours, various things, then all of these other bits that are recorded on their employee contribution statement, up until this change and improvement in the functionality, then accountants just don't have access to that unless the GP is willing to go in and download the employee contribution statement and send them a copy. And we've kind of advised them to do that over the years, but they've never been that keen to do that. So this will bring a real benefit into being able to get accurate Type 1 and Type 2 forms completed first time, we hope. So that just gives a bit more context. Just going back to the questions, can more than one person have access to, presume that's, can more than one person have the role for a pension scheme member? So again, yes, that can be. It might be that there's 2 or 3 different people that work for one large accountancy firm that may be managing your practice accounts, including Type 1 forms, etc. So those 3 people can be given the same role linked to Dr. X and then to Dr. Y, etc. But also talking to some of the key stakeholders from the accountancy representative bodies last week, they were pointing out that there might be the regular accountancy firm who's dealing with the business as usual kind of, annual accounts and Type 1 forms for the partners and things like that. So they would need and want that access. You would provide them access, a link to Dr. X, but there might also be a different firm who's providing some support for historic issues. If there's been practice takeover or things like that. And it might be that they also need access, and that's fine too. Or equally, it could be that there's a practice manager or a practice administrator who's providing certain support who also needs access or to be linked to the same pension scheme member. So multiple people can have a link to the same GP pension scheme member, as long as the GP is confirmed to the user administrator that they're happy for that to be in place. And that's the other key point, I guess, that there's no bureaucracy to go through other than the GP acknowledging it. But this is a discussion between the GP and the user administrator as to who are the right people to be able to access their records. There isn't any step to go through PCSE to arrange that or get permission for that. Just a bit of a side question, but I'm going to answer it anyway from Michael. Can the end of year certificates be submitted through PCSE online this year? As last year they had to be through Contact Us. The Type 1 forms are about to go live on Thursday night as well, Michael, so they will be live from Friday morning. Type 2 forms have been live on PCSE online since October, so absolutely they're available, and please do use the functionality if you're able to. We can come back to questions later on. We can carry on.
Lovely, thanks Katrina. So we'll just move on then to the video that shows you what it'll look like for a GP accountant once they do have access to PCSE online.
I'm going to show you how the GP accountant user can access the PCSE online employee contribution statement and create type 1 or type 2 forms for GP pension scheme members that they have been linked to in PCSE online. So once I have logged in as the GP accountant user, then I click the pensions and payments tile, GP pensions, and then first of all we'll have a look at the employee contribution statement. So once I have entered the employee contribution statement screen, then I enter the GP GMC number and we will enter that. I can also search by NI number or NHS pension scheme membership number. So this is our test GP, and if we scroll down, then we simply select the financial year that we want to look at. So I want to look at 24-25, and I click search, and then I will see all of the income, pensionable pay and monthly contributions for my client. The GP pension scheme member may have different types of income, and if they do, perhaps they have some solo work or locum work, then I'm able to filter on income type, and I'll see different options if they do have multiple employment types. So I can filter on that or filter on practice and click the search button if I want to see the totals. But I can also scroll down to the very bottom of the screen and click download CSV, and that will provide a CSV version of the employee contribution statement that I can save and refer back to. I can also then go back to the GP pensions tile and choose this time annual certificate type 1, because the pension scheme member I'm linked to has type 1 income. So if I click type 1 annual certificate forms, then I'm able to again enter the pension scheme membership number for the member that I am linked to, click on that, and then I can start to complete the type 1 form as normal. So I need to select practice and then select the financial year. Let's say I want to do 24-25, and then I'm going to start checking all of the details and completing the form. So this shows you the access that is available to the GP accountant user when I'm searching either on the type 1 or type 2 screen or on the employee contribution statement screen. Then I will only have information returned for pension scheme members that I am linked to as an accountant. So if I haven't been linked as an accountant by the practice user administrator to the GP pension scheme members that I act on behalf of, I won't be able to see any of their information. So we need the user administrator to take that action initially, and following that, once they've confirmed that you've been linked to the pension scheme member, then as an accountant, you'll be able to log in and use this functionality.
Okay, so just to end this area then, Katrina, I don't know if there's anything that you want to run through quickly with regards to questions before we make a start on practice estimates.
So there is a question about, does the GP need to approve the access? I think it's a very good question. So they don't, as they sort of touched on a bit earlier, then the GP's confirming offline to the user administrator, yes, it's accountant X that acts on my behalf, or this firm and it's these people, etc. Or it might be, as I say, in some cases it could be even practice manager, then that's dealt with offline between the practice and the GP, and there's no approval step in the system for that. And I think there's a question there that says, wouldn't it be useful to be able to delete an accountant from all roles at the same time rather than having to enter them individually? So this is what we've just shown you in the third video, about dissociating the link or breaking the link between an accountant and a GP pension scheme member because the GP's changed accountants or whatever, and the practice has changed accountant firm. Then that's only to break that link. That doesn't deactivate all the roles that an accountant user has on PCSE Online. If the accountant user no longer has already got normal access to practice details, as we said earlier, like statement rules and things like that, the user management functionality for removing users still exists. So the video there is purely to say there's been a change in accountant, because there's also the other scenario where the GP could move to a different practice but still keep the same accountant, so it's still legitimate that the accountant has access to that GP's record. So it's not linked to the practice, and that was actually the respective information governance teams at both NHS England and PCSE, that when they looked at what the solution needed to be for this, they were very clear that it needed to be on a per pension scheme member basis, and not that you've got access to everybody at a practice, which is how the rest of the PCSE Online functionality works. So that's probably enough to cover on this for now, so we can move on.
Yep, so moving on to annual practice estimates of pensionable profit then. So we'll be mainly focusing for submissions in PCSE Online. So just starting off with the overview then. Now, practice estimates forms should be submitted using PCSE Online. Now, these do need to be submitted annually as well before the deadline, just to make sure that accurate contributions are being paid by the practice. It ensures that the estimate is as accurate as possible, and if you do so, that will avoid any large adjustments at the practice. You find that the PCSE Online estimate form does pre-populate with all the details, so it does make it a quite simple form to complete in PCSE Online when all your active pension scheme numbers are on there. So I'm going to hand you back over to Katrina to touch on tier rates.
Thanks, Debbie. So as Debbie says, estimates are now live on PCSE Online. So they went live last week for 26-27. Deadline, just to confirm, is the 28th of February. So if anybody who has the task of submitting an estimate hasn't used PCSE Online to submit before, then please do go to the form and try it. It's very straightforward to do, as we'll show you a few screenshots in a moment, but we've also got some videos and things on YouTube. But as you'll probably all be aware, then the tier rates vary for the NHS pension scheme from year to year. So the 26-27 tier rates, they were announced by NHS Pensions before the start of the year when they published the paper estimate form. And essentially all you're doing with the estimate is, as you'll be aware, you're looking at, to the best of your knowledge, what will the estimated annual income be for the salaried GP, the GP partner or the non-GP partner, and then looking at the relevant tier rate table. So it'll be the tier rate table for 26-27, and it will be just looking at the estimated income that you're expecting for the year for this particular member, which salary bracket does that fall into, and therefore which tier rate do you select on the estimate form. So if you take the example and we were estimating that the GP was going to have an annual income of about £50,000, then we'd see that would fall under the 9.8% bracket, because it's between 35,156 and 52,778. So so I'd select 9.8% tier rates. I think the thing just to mention is that if you've got GPs that work for you who've got multiple roles, then they may, somebody may be part-time GP, salary GP at the practice, maybe it's the 25,000 estimated income there, but they might have, an out-of-hours role, be a GP appraiser for a region, etc., and taking into account all of those roles, then that might take them into, something like 70,000, 80,000, taking them up to the 12.5% bracket. So what you need to do really before completing the estimate is just check with the GPs that work as salaried or partnered if they do have other practitioner roles and the total income. So although you're recording the pensionable pay for your practice, the estimated pensionable pay for your practice, then the tier rate that you select for the GP should be based on what their estimated total pensionable pay is. So it's just to bear that in mind. And that means that when it comes to the end of the pension year, and then the following cycle of type 1 and type 2 forms are published and the GPs or whoever's completing them on their behalf complete them and submit them, it means that you're much less likely to be faced as a practice with large adjustments if you've got your upfront estimated income as close as you can, but also if you've just taken a moment to check with the GP whether that tier rate feels right to them, if they've got other roles that maybe you may not even be very aware of. So just check with all of the GPs before you complete that, just to send to check the tier rate that they think they should be on. The annual certificates, type 1 and type 2 forms, once they're submitted, they do that full reconciliation and they will correct any under or overpayments at that time. But we do know that it can be difficult for practices when they've got multiple forms being reconciled at once and then multiple adjustments if there are arrears. So the closer and more realistic you can make the estimates up front, the better, really. Okay, so this just goes through the kind of steps in PCSE Online. So we're logging in, we're going to GP pensions and payments, we click pensions, and then we're clicking on estimate. And when we click on estimate, there's two buttons. One says practice estimate, one says practice estimate listing. So we would click on practice estimate, and then if we move on, we will have the option now to select 26/27. That's been available for the last couple of days. So we select 26/27, and then we're presented with the screen that shows us and is pre-populated with GP partners at the top. The second section is any salaried GPs, and if we had any non-GP partners, then they're populated in the third section at the bottom. If we have an estimate in the system from the previous year, then in most circumstances, there are some exceptions, but in most circumstances, the estimated income will pre-populate based on the same figures as last year. But ultimately, you're checking and over-typing, or if it's got zeros, you're typing in the estimated income and then selecting the tier rate. Then that's highlighting. So we've completed the estimated income for the partners and the salaried GP on the bottom row, and then we're selecting the tier rate. So this is an example from, I think, last year probably, where we selected 12.5% for our top partner because they've got 120,000. We've also selected 12.5% for the second partner because I think their estimated income for our practice, our test practice, is 60,000, but they've also told us that they've got some solo work, which even if we don't fill in an amount in column E at the end there, if we know that, and we know that takes them then into the likely 12.5% bracket, then it's 12.5% that we've selected in the estimate, so that the monthly contributions that get deducted from our practice contractual payments are more accurate as they can be. And like I said earlier there, that means that there's less likelihood of a large adjustment when end of year certificates are submitted and reconciled. And then our salary GP, then again, we've selected 9.8%. So it's very simple form. That's all that we need to do, really. I think if we go on to the next slide, there's a it's cut off on the last slide, but there's a submit button at the bottom, and that's it done. There is also, when we went through the steps to get into the estimate area on PCSE Online, there's also the practice estimate listing. So if we click on that, you can see there some examples of 25-26. You can see that we've submitted and already submitted a revised estimate. In this test example, you can click on the hyperlink under the View Estimates column at the very right-hand side there on the table that is presented to you when you go to the Estimates listing button, and you can open up the estimate to check what you've just submitted. It's good practice to do that because we have had some examples where people have phoned our customer service centre in a bit of a panic because instead of putting 90,000, this is a real example, instead of putting 90,000 into the estimate, somebody put in 900,000. We've had other examples where people haven't noticed that they've done that. And, there's a lot of rushing and scraping around to try and get adjustments done very quickly and, help people who've made that error so that the practice doesn't get impacted for too long by it. So it is very good practice once you've submitted the estimate to go to the listing screen, click on the hyperlink, open it up and just double check. Obviously double check your figures before you click submit. That's the first bit of good practice, but even when you've done that, we can all make mistakes, and you're not going to have made the mistake, but if you find yourself in that unfortunate position, then do give us a call straight away, and we try and get that fixed before the payment run takes place. And then the bottom little snippet there is actually just showing the submit button that is on that previous screen. Let me just cut it there to show you what it looks like. And it kind of goes a little bit of a paler pink colour once you've clicked on it. And that way, but again, you can go to the listing screen and you can see that your estimate has been successfully submitted. So as long as you've submitted your estimate by the 28th of February deadline, that will be in time for the payment runs for April, because some of the system preparation for April payment runs, for those that take place early in April, or early in the month, that have practice payments early in the month, the start of the month, if you can imagine, the system preparation and calculation stuff all takes place, towards the end of March. So that's why the deadline is the 28th of February from NHS Pensions, so that there is time to make sure that the correct calculations are in place for the April pay runs, and the correct deductions then each month based on the estimate you've submitted are what you will then see on your practice statement. So it just takes that annual estimated income, applies the tier rate to it, divides that by 12, so you've got a 12th each month, and that's the employee contributions that you will see deducted on the practice statement. It takes the annual estimated income and multiplies that by the employer contribution rate of 14.38%, and that's what you see on the practice statement section for employer contribution deductions. And then if any of your GP pension scheme members have AVC contracts or added years contracts, then you'll also see that that's applied, the percentage that we've got on record for their contract is applied to the estimated income, and that also shows on your practice statement as the deduction each month. You'll be very familiar with all of that. That's just showing when you open the estimate how that appears, which is where it's calculated the monthly contribution. So in column, it doesn't actually have a letter, does it? So the column that says estimated monthly at the top of it, so the red box is round the annual estimated income in column C, what the income then is for estimated each month. So the 5,000 is at 619 on that example is the estimated monthly income. It's multiplied by the tier rate that we've selected. So in this example, it's 12.5. So it's telling us that the monthly contribution for employee contributions for this GP is £702.45, and that's what you'll see on the listing screen. Those calculations are done straight away when you have submitted the estimate. If at a certain point in the year, any of your partners, you need to revise their estimated income up or down, then you can submit a revised estimate. So again, go to PCSE Online and submit a further practice estimate, and you can key in the updated figures, and from the following month onwards, then that revised amount will be taken. So we've just taken an adjusted amount, and if you have a salaried GP who has a change in salary and potentially tier rates, then you can complete the salary change form on PCSE Online for them. For salaried GPs, it also allows you to backdate. So if you're doing a salary change form today, but actually the GP's change in salary was effective from the 1st of January 26 or even the 1st of December 25, you're able to do that on a salary change form. But for partners, it's just the estimate, and you can also submit revised estimates for salary GPs if you prefer to do so, but the salary change form is also there. So all of this, none of the stuff on estimates is new. It's all exactly the same functionality as before, but we just thought we'd do a bit of a recap where we were going to bring practice managers and practice user administrators together to talk about the new accountant access functionality. I just thought it was good timing to recap on the estimate process. Okay, so key points then. So you can complete that estimate now, the next 10 minutes or tomorrow or 11 o'clock on Saturday night if you love doing things on a Saturday night. So the point is that the functionality is there, you can do it at any time, but the deadline is the 28th of February. We've talked about keeping the estimated income up to date to mitigate the risk of having then seen large adjustments at some point, 18 months, 2 years down the line, or even later, if your GPs are tardy at submitting their end of year forms. So bear that in mind. So a couple of key things on here. That's all very straightforward what I've gone through there, and it really is one of the quickest and easiest processes to do on PCSE Online. It works really, really well. There is a challenge if you go to that estimate and you pull it up, select 2627, and one of the GPs you're expecting to be listed on there is not there. So that's the real challenge that some people sometimes face. There's, I guess, two likely reasons for that. One is that you have never completed or submitted a pensions joiner on PCSE Online. So if a GP joined you, so we're going to be doing 24-25 end of year forms, but 25-26 estimates. But 26-27 estimates. If a GP has joined you, partway through this current pension year and you haven't completed the joiner form yet, then you won't see them on the estimate. So all you need to do is just go to the joiner form and say, so even if they started on the 1st of April 25, or they might even have started 1st of January 25, which is the previous pension year again, you can go all the way back to the 1st of April of the previous pension year when completing a pensions joiner form now. So you go to the pensions joiner screen, enter the income and tier rate for whatever year it is. So that might be 25-26 if they started, in say December 25, or it might be that it's 24-25 if they started in January 24. Effective date for the GP starting and their salary and tier rate in the joiner form, that will collect the arrears that are due up until now, and it will mean that you can successfully complete the estimate so that 26-27 gets off to the right start. So you've got the link between the two processes there. If you go to try and complete the pensions joiner on PCSE Online and you're not able to select the GP, that means that either the GP hasn't done this first step that they actually need to do to initiate the whole joining process, which is to log into PCSE Online and to submit an employment change that says, I have started at practice X on whatever date it was. And when they do that, so if they haven't done that at all, you need to get them to do that, and then it will be approved by the practice if they're a salaried GP, and it needs to be currently needs to be approved by the practice and the ICB if they're a partner. So if the GP hasn't done it at all, you need to get them to do that employment change, get the approvals done, and then you'll be able to do the pensions joiner, get the pensions joiner done. That'll sort itself out, correcting the arrears, and then you'll be able to do this forward estimate for 26-27, but you need to catch up with the bit that's not been collected yet, or the months that haven't been collected yet. That's one scenario. It could be that our GP has diligently done what they needed to do, but that the employment change is sitting waiting on, if they're a salary GP, it would be just the practice. So it's worth checking that if the GP has already submitted, or if they're a partner, it could be that it's waiting for the ICB. So there are those steps that need to have taken place
for you to do the joiner. Now, this only becomes a problem if you go to your estimate and this GP who's recently joined you or joined you in the last year or whenever is not showing on there. It means that those initial steps haven't been done. Once they're done, they're on the estimate thereafter until they leave you and you complete a leaver for them. But the two things are intrinsically linked and you can't do one when the other one hasn't been done. So I hope that makes sense. We do talk about this on every webinar that we have with practices, so you've probably heard it a number of times before, but it's just to recap on it. And yeah, I've talked about there is a salary change form for salary GPs, so we've covered that. You can view previously submitted estimates by using the listing screen functionality or the listing screen button. We've talked about that, and Debbie will recap at the end about how we'll follow up with you, but there are various resources available on our website and YouTube videos, etc., for people that are a bit newer to the process and need to get into that all in a bit more detail. There is one that links then to estimates there about partner who left on the 12th of November 25, so real life example, the performer record has been updated to show that they're no longer at that practice. So the GP's done their bit, the approval's been done by the practice and the ICB for a partner. Pension deductions are still being taken and shown on the estimate. So you need to do the pensions leaver form on PCSE Online. Dead quick to do. Go in, click leaver, put the end date, so the date that they left. So the date that their employment change shows that they were no longer at the practice, same date for the leaver, and that will stop pension deductions from the next contractual payment. But also, you're going to put that in as 12th of November 25. It will automatically refund what's been taken from your practice already for the second half of November, for December, and I guess probably for January by the time we're getting to it now. So, you know, the processes are there to automate things, to do them so that you get the corrections, etc., as quickly as possible. So just go to PCSE Online and complete that leaver form in the pensions area and you'll be absolutely up to date. And that will then mean when that's done, go back in to create an estimate again, and that GP should no longer show on your estimate form. So that's fine. So there's a question here about, if I know that salaried GPs are expecting a 3% annual uplift in April, can you add this when completing the annual estimate form? Absolutely. What you're doing is you're estimating what you think their pensionable pay for the year is going to be. So if you know, if you are estimating it's going to be 3% more than they get paid in this year, put that put the up-to-date estimated income in to the estimate, and then the pension deductions will be taken from your practice at that more accurate rate. And if salary GPs have their own accountants, can we link them? Absolutely. And I know it's a one-off task, an administrator has to then log in, put that email address in, and for the GP, and then put the accountant details in. So it does probably take a couple of minutes for each one, but it is a one-off task, and it will be very, very helpful if salary GPs are using accountants to help them with their Type 2 forms. It'll be extremely helpful for them to be able to access the employee contribution statements and maybe even do the Type 2 form on PCSE Online. But at least by accessing the employee contribution statement, they will know exactly what incomes and contributions that we've got on record for their client. And Type 2 GPs do typically are more likely to have a portfolio of roles where they've got all sorts of different things that the accountant or the GP has to take into account when completing the Type 2. So yes, please do that one-off task for them. There's a question about maternity leave and approved leave. So we're about to get some updated guidance on that. So I'm not going to answer that one at the moment. But ultimately, just record the estimated income into the estimate form to get that going, so that you're not delaying your estimate for the other GPs that might be at the practice. There's another one about partner who's no longer in the pension scheme but still works here. If they've opted out, if they've completed the opt-out properly, they wouldn't be shown on the estimate. So just query with them what they've actually been done. But if somebody has left the practice, then it's the leaver form. But if somebody's opted out of the pension scheme, it's the opt-out form. But they need to have opted out, in time. So at the time they want to, you can't opt out retrospectively. So you need to make sure they've done the administration right. Otherwise, they'll only be able to opt out like from now when they complete it. the one very last one, and this is more probably relevant. We're doing a type 2 webinar tonight, but I do understand that, that's targeted at GPs completing their forms. From a practice point of view, can we see how the final income figure is updated in type 2 online, as it won't match the estimate? So I guess if you have this new link as a user to the GP pension scheme member, you will in future be able to see. So we looked at the listing screen for the estimates. Just about everything in PCSE Online's got a listing screen, so you can look at what's been submitted previously. Type 2 forms do as well. So totally understand that, GP submits their type 2, all you get to see is whether there's an adjustment on your practice statement, whether it's a refund or whether it's a deduction, more likely. So you will, if the GP agrees that you can have this link role, so GP accountant role linked, then be able to see the type 2 forms in the listing screen and sort of refer back to that. But lots of questions answered there. Hopefully, I think it covers most of the topics. Thanks very much.
No, that was great. Thank you for that, Katrina. So just to end the session then, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon and taking time out of your busy schedules from the practice. There has been lots and lots of questions that's been posted in the Q&A. I know Katrina has answered a lot, and also our colleague Con has been answering them in the chat. But what we'll do, we will review all the questions, and then if there are any gaps, questions that aren't currently within our FAQ section on the PCSE website, we will be making sure that that gets updated. Katrina mentioned earlier, we've got videos on YouTube about how to complete the estimate form. There's things about joining forms, things like that. You'll also be able to find the videos that we went through at the beginning of the session about the GP accountant access. So there's lots of information readily available for you. On that note, I will let you all go and just want to say thanks again for attending.